In 2007, in the medieval town of Perugia, Italy, the body of the English Erasmus student Meredith Kircher was found lifeless on the floor of the cottage she shared with some other students. Amongst them, Amanda Knox, who was from Seattle but was also on Erasmus. Amanda Knox, who was nicknamed Foxy Knoxy, was prosecuted as the author of the crime along with her boyfriend Raffaele Sollecito and Rudy Getty, the employer of Amanda. This verdict was later dismissed, and Amanda Knox was a free woman. Happiness wouldn't last long though, since she was convicted again and incarcerated. However, once again the evidence was inconclusive and she had to be released from prison. But is she innocent? On the first version, Amanda said that she and Sollecito had spent the whole night at his apartment watching Amelie on his computer. Meanwhile they were watching the movie, Amanda received a text message from Patrick Lumumba, owner of the bar where Amanda worked. However, Lumumba told her she didn't have to go to that night shift, to which she replied, "Ci vediamo più tardi." The investigators concluded that by saying so, he was also incriminated in Kircher's murder. Actually, Amanda Knox framed him and told the police that Lumumba was the real killer. Hence, he was arrested and held for 2 weeks. Eventually, a man who was drinking in his bar the night of the murder testified that Lumumba had been there in the bar the whole night. He was immediately released from his cell and cleared out as a suspect. Following this initial version, Amanda made sure that they didn't go out that night and went to sleep until 10:30 a.m. in the next morning. The next day added that before going to his apartment, they went to a party. Sollecito was called in for questioning at the police station and confronted with his phone records that showed that he had called the emergency number at 12:51 p.m. Confronted with evidence, changed his story. Now, the couple hadn't gone to a party, but he went home alone instead and waited for Amanda, who was at a party with some friends, and returned back home by 1 a.m. Allegedly, they spent the night together, and in the next morning she left to her cottage. Sollecito changed his story once again at his preliminary hearing, stating that he was home but didn't remember whether Amanda was with him or not. In this fourth version, he said that Amanda and he had been smoking marijuana, and because of that, he was worried that his memories would be a bit blurry and confusing about the night. Then they had dinner together and Amanda headed to the pub where she was working, but as he was saying that, he remembered that the pub was closed at night, so Amanda couldn't have been working. At that moment, he begins to doubt whether Amanda had been absent during that night or not. He, however, knows for sure that they slept together on the night of the murder. He later changed his statement and finally admitted that Amanda couldn't have killed Meredith Kircher because she'd spent the whole night with him at his apartment. Raffaele Sollecito wrote a book about the events and once again said that he can't be sure if Amanda had been absent that night or not. Why Sollecito's alibi is a lie. In every one of the 4 different versions, Raffaele uses his computer. However, there was lack of computer activity when it was tracked down for clues. Police contacted his ISP provider, and the logs from that night show no web page request. Phone and computer activity when he claimed to be sleeping. According to Sollecito, they had been sleeping all night long at his apartment, but his computer showed activity at 5:30 a.m. The person using his computer logged in to iTunes and played an MP3 file through it. Do you remember that they said their phones had been switched off? Solecito's phone was activated at 6 a.m. Marco Quintabele, who owned a shop, testified that Amanda was outside his store at a quarter to 8 a.m. in the morning. This disassembles her alibi that she'd been sleeping until 10:30 a.m. She was waiting for the store to open, and once it was open, she headed directly to the cleaning products section and brought a pair of bottles of bleach. Witnesses saw the couple in public the night of the murder. Antonio Curatolo saw the couple near Piazza Grimana, which was nearby the scene of the murder around 11:30 p.m. Curatolo departed from the square at midnight and they weren't around any longer. Nara Capezzali, who was at the square at that time, heard a loud scream at around 11 p.m. and then heard two people running up to the metal stairs that led to Via Pinturecchio. Hekuran Kokomani testified that he saw Amanda Solecito and Rudy Guede together the night of the murder, only a few meters away from the cottage where Meredith had been killed. However, the judge declared that he wasn't a reliable witness. Kokomani said that he was driving and had to stop because there was a black garbage bag on the road, and by the time he stopped, he saw the three of them together. Kokomani states to have punched Solecito because of a fight and that Amanda pulled out a knife and was holding it over his head. Kokomani threw some olives and a cell phone at Amanda before going away for protection. After that, Kokomani found Rudy Guede, who told him that the knife had been used to cut a pie because they have had a celebration at the cottage. Apparently, Rudy asked Kokomani for his car to move some furniture from the house the next day. When few days later Kokomani found out about the murder, called his attorney to report what had happened that night. Kokomani was offered a bribe, was offered $1,100 to not testify, but he rejected the money and had to ask for counseling, and he was receiving threats against him and his family. There's evidence of Solecito's family influencing the testimony of several witnesses. Kokomani's testimony has been always little believed because previously he had been arrested for drug possession. Double DNA knife. This knife was seized from Raffaele's cutlery. It was discovered when Inspector Finzi was ordered to perform a search on his apartment, where he could smell a strong presence of bleach. On the blade, there's Amanda's DNA. This evidence was not taken very seriously because when it was tested twice, the second time it gave negative results on blood. This may be because to a pair of things. The second time it was a TMB test, which only detects blood, and on the first test it may have detected some human tissue. The second possible option is that the amount of blood was below the sensitivity threshold of the test and therefore Meredith couldn't have been injured with it. On 2011, it was retested again and noted to be human material, but refused to extract a profile on account of it being too low. The new appeal court in 2013 ordered that this analysis be carried out. The result was Knox's profile. A perfect match. There's other forensic evidence that contains both Raffaele and Amanda's DNA, like the bra clasp. The bra was removed by cutting the back strap. Let's explain how Solecito's DNA was found on the bra. Human DNA exists within 22 pairs of chromosomes that are not sex-related, which are the autosomal ones. An additional pair of sex-related, X and Y. Both pair of chromosomes were on the sample from the bra clasp. On the test for autosomal, or what is the same for non-sex-related chromosomes, they found that Solecito matched on 16 locus points. That means that is a very strong match. In a simpler way, in most cases, having 10 locus points is considered a reason to declare someone guilty. Sollecito also gave positive on the sex-related tests. The possibility that the DNA belongs to someone else is 1 in a trillion. Yet again, there exists risk of contamination, but it's not possible for the bra to be contaminated because the bra never left Meredith's bedroom. DNA does not magically appear somewhere. This means that if Raphael's DNA was found there, he must have unequivocally touched it. The staged burglary. Police officers immediately suspected that it was staged and that the call to the emergency number sounded rehearsed. Valuables in plain sight were not touched. The glass from the broken window was on top of the displaced items, indicating that the room had been ransacked prior to the window being broken. The point of entry involved the burglar to climb almost 4 meters. Multiple better points of entry existed. The shutters of the windows in the point of entry were closed, and to break the window would require the burglar to climb the wall and return to the ground to throw the rock and then climb the wall again. The position of Meredith's body suggested that it had been moved to the center of the room. Her bra was found in an area devoid of blood, yet one strap was thoroughly soaked. DNA findings in Philomena's room. Philomena was a housemaid of Meredith and Amanda Knox. A luminol trace was found to have both Amanda and the victim DNA, yet no Philomena's DNA could be found despite being her room. Knox and Sollecito attempted to divert attention from themselves. Knox falsely accused her former employer, Patrick Lumumba. Selective cleaning of the residence took place after the murder. Some footprints were cleaned, whereas others weren't. At 1 p.m., Filomena and Paola arrive. At 1:08 p.m., Meredith's door is found locked. According to Knox, that is no surprise because Meredith's door is always locked. At 1:15 p.m., Luca forces Meredith's door and finds her body. Battistelli calls for assistance. Knox's effort to delay the finding of the body. While Amanda says that Meredith's door is always locked, Filomena panics and says that it is unusual for her to have her door locked and demands the door to be forced open. Footprint on the pillow. Shoe print made in blood was discovered on the pillow under Meredith's body. The print resulted to be made by a shoe of the same size of Amanda. Injuries on Amanda's neck. She had a scratch on her neck. She said it was a hickey, but it had no resemblance to a hickey at all. On Sollecito's apartment, a receipt of bleach was found consistent of 2 bottles of bleach found under the kitchen sink. His cleaning lady said that she'd never seen those bottles before. In the apartment, police could smell a strong presence of bleach, which implied it had been used recently. Amanda knew details of the crime she shouldn't have known. Amanda hadn't allegedly seen the crime scene or the position of the body of Meredith, yet she knew that she'd been placed next to the closet in the middle of the room. How could she have known that? Sollecito's emergency call. The first call is cut off. Sollecito called the Carabinieri 15 minutes after Inspector Battistelli and Marcy arrived to Amanda's cottage. Their arrival was due to the finding of Meredith's phone in the garden of Elisabetta Lana, who was their neighbor. What happened between 12 a.m. and 2 p.m.? This period of time was what happened for the 2 hours between the mobile phone being delivered to the postal office and the discovery of Meredith's murder. 12:36. Police arrives at the entrance of the cottage in Via della Pergola numero 7. 2 minutes later, they go into the cottage. Battistelli looks at Filomena's room. 12:44. Marcy joins Battistelli. They confirm that Filomena's jewelry hadn't been stolen. 12:55 p.m. They go outside to examine the point of entry.